So I think we have quorum right now. I officially declare this meeting commenced. So at the very beginning, we would go right into examination of provisions. So before we do that, we would first invite representatives for the government to explain each provision to us one by one. So regarding that, you could kindly refer to the document 12 to 15 of year 2022 and the relevant provisions contained therein in document 13 and 15. In other words, it's CB parentheses 4 136/2022 parentheses 01 to parentheses 03. So because number 14 is a new legislation, new piece of law, so we do not have that relevant paper. And similarly, that also applies to document number 13. So it's the document pertaining to the 2022 document 1 to 13 and the relevant provisions contained with the relevant markups. In other words, it's LCCB parentheses 4 136/2022 parentheses 04 document. So we would ask the Legislative Council legal counselor to remind all our council members about the relevant legal points of view that needs to be noted. So without further ado, let us first invite the government to introduce these provisions. So the first provision that we have to handle is the 599F, subsidiary legislation pertaining to the prevention and control of the disease, parentheses, business and premises. Thank you, Chairman. So the first provision that we have to handle is the 599F, prevention and control of disease, requirements and directions, business and premises. The legal note of number 12 of year 2022. So the relevant provision has already taken effect on 12th of February. So the first amendment is the amendment of article number 2 under 599F regarding to designated activity, parentheses C. So this definition is because we have, after we have introduced the laws pertaining to multiple households in 599G, we have changed the relevant position as specified. That's the second amendment. And the next amendment is in appendix number 2. So schedule 2, we have added some new premises under the designated premises, and under paragraph 17, we have added paragraphs 18 to 23. So in paragraph 18, it says premises other than a beauty parlor. In 19, we added premises, religious premises, and number 20 is about shopping malls, and number 21 is department stores. Number 22 is markets or wet markets, and number 23 is about supermarkets. And correspondingly, under the interpretation, with regards to, we have added the relevant interpretations of those premises, including religious premises. We define it at any premises where which serves a religious function, and also for shopping mall means any indoor shopping area with a variety of shops and often restaurants. And for markets, we also have means any indoor premises with one or more dedicated entrances where goods are sold at different stores or stores at the premises. And regarding those definitions, we have also introduced a definition for what indoor means. So those are the legal amendments when regards to 599F. So thank you. Councillors, if you have any opinion, kindly raise your hand with the reaction button. And we would examine these provisions one by one, expressing our approval or disapproval. So now with regards to 599F, with regards to what the government representatives have just informed us about, so this is about religious premises, shopping malls, beauty parlors, premises known as department stores, markets, and self-service shops, etc. Are there any views or points of view that the councillors would wish to make? Any opinions? Anybody? So if the members do not have any opinions, it's passed. So please, I ask the government representatives to continue to introduce the 599G to us. Thank you, Chairman. Our next amendment is about prevention and control of disease prevented in final 599G. It has been published in the document N13 of year 2022. So the relevant legal amendments have already taken effect starting from the 12th of February. The amendments that we have made, including number 1, we have changed the name of this provision. We have changed it to prohibition on group gathering. So the scope of the law has widened, so we have changed the name of the law correspondingly. And secondly, with regards to definitions, when it comes to the fixed fine, apart from participating in group gatherings like 2 people or 4 people gatherings, apart from that, with regards to multi-household gathering, we also have set a fixed fine for that as well. So we have made corresponding changes in order for that law to take effect. And secondly, with regard to the definition of gathering, we have changed it from 4 people to 2 people, which is part of the tightening of the social distancing measures. And thirdly, under the definition, we have added a multi-household gathering. In other words, the gathering of more than 1 household and private premises. In other words, any premise to which the public may not or are not permitted to have access from time to time, and prohibited multi-household gathering. In other words, multi-household gathering that takes place, which is prohibited under the Section 8A. And also the previous exemption gathering has also been expanded. So we have changed the definitions pertaining to exempted gathering as well. So I see that Councillor Gong Yuk Foon has raised her hand. Councillor Gong, please. Thank you. I'd like to ask our colleagues at the government with regards to the prohibited multi-household gathering. So I understand that under 8C, exempted gathering, with regards to repairs and emergency services, if it's necessary, you could do that. I would like to ask, if, say, you are under one family, if you hire some renovation workers to conduct renovation work, so those workers will be from multiple households, different households. So would that fall under the purview of prohibited multi-household gatherings? So I want to look at what you have said about exempted gatherings in part 1, and under number 4, they said that work is exempted, but turns out this exemption does not apply to the prohibited multi-household gatherings. In other words, for some construction works like construction sites, or let's say the residential area is a construction site or it's renovation work, that would fall under the purview of 4A. Could the government clarify on that point? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor, for your question. So firstly, any gathering at a workplace for the sake of work is also one of the exemptions under the prohibition on multi-household gatherings. And what Councillor Kong has said, that under the law, we have clearly stipulated that for the sake of repairs and emergency works, necessary works and maintenance, there is exactly an exemption which solves the problem that Councillor Kong has raised. So assuming that in a private residential area, there needs to some emergency repairs, we understand that not all workers and renovation workers, they are most likely not from the same family. And precisely because of that eventuality, under multi-household gatherings, we have offered exemptions on repairs and maintenance. I understand. I would like to ask, could you in the law clearly tell me part 1 exemption of gatherings, which chapter could you find that? Like I might have missed it somewhere. Like how does it fall under the prohibition of multi-household gathering? I don't really see how it relates to prohibition of multi-household gathering. Where is it? If you look at 8C, on 8C parenthesis C, we have clearly stipulated that under Schedule 1, Part 1, apart from Item 6, all types of gathering are exemptions under the multi-household gathering prohibition. So why is it exempt? Because we are usually talking about people who live in the same household, assuming there's a one household, there's a huge household. If they're all on the street, then usually we would not require them to be subject to the 2 persons and 4 persons limitations, but under the provisions of a multi-household limitations, we have extracted that part of the law out. So in other words, if you go to a location for renovation, it's not urgent, right? But they have to renovate. That means that they will not fall under this prohibition, because a lot of citizens are very anxious about that point. If they are in accordance with repair and maintenance, no, it's not repairs, it's renovations, it's not repairs, because some families, in order to move to a new household, they have to conduct renovations. It's not repairs, it's not maintenance, it's not urgent. Then would the exemption pertaining to works for the sake of work apply, right? Because I have an emergency inquiry from one of my constituents saying that the management company, property management company, does not allow their workers to go up to renovate their house. So they quoted this law to ban these workers from going up to renovate. And for that reason, the renovation works have been delayed by an entire month. So I'm very concerned about that, and I would like to take this opportunity to ask you clearly about this. It's not repairs, not maintenance, it's not urgent. Could the exemption under Article 4 apply? So overall, it does apply. For example, like today, everyone is working here. We fall under the purview of Article 4 as well. So if the people in that residential area, if all of them are working, then this exemption should apply. Thank you very much. Okay, next, Carmen Khan Wyman. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask the Bureau, under 599G, in Part 8D, so could you explain this to me first? The 8D, the newly added provisions. So the Chief Secretary could permit multi-household gatherings. What's the idea behind this policy? And recently, I've asked about this as well. If we want to make sure that the CE elections go smoothly, we need to nominate, we need to campaign and do all the campaign and related activity. Is the government planning to quote Art 8D, or do you have other preparations? That's the first question. And secondly, what I would like to know is that under Schedule 1, Part 1 and item number 6, just now when the FHB responded, they said that Article 6, Part 6 have changed to usually living under the same household. So recently, when you responded to the answer from our legal counsel, this article is for the sake of people living in subdivided units. Could you clarify that point? Is that the reason behind the changing of the wording of the law? Okay, please, Undersecretary. So let me respond to the question, right? Thank you, Chairman. So firstly, it's about the Article 8D. If we look at the Article 8D, at the same time, we could also look at 599G, the structure of 599G itself. So usually, with regards to what we say about the 2-person, 4-person social distancing measures, under Article 5, we have empowered the Chief Secretary to permit some types of gatherings which happen in a public space. So when we are drafting this law about gathering in private premises, we have followed the existing articles in the social distancing measure orders. So as what Councillor Khan have said, that in the future, we may need to use these powers in order to exempt certain things where we think is necessary to conduct despite the pandemic. So of course, what Councillor Carmen Khan has mentioned, if it's about the CE elections and other relevant activities, except for the exemptions under 8D, under 599G, we have also another mechanism that we make use of, is found under Schedule 1, exemption. We have added some extra categories of exemptions. If the time comes, if the CE elections and the relevant campaign activity starts to take place, we would then look and see whether 8D is more appropriate, or would we add more things under Schedule 1. But what we want to say is that under the existing 599G, there are already mechanisms to permit the activities that need to take place.
As regards Ms. Khan's second question, when we drafted the relevant provisions on multi-households gathering, we thought of how to describe a household, and usually that means people living in the same place, same residence. There should be some flexibility because on some occasions, there is a person, let's say one day, he may need to stay overnight in his office for work reason. So we'd like to add in some flexibility here. So what constitutes a household? We actually replied to your legal advisor that we use the ordinary meaning in the dictionary for household, for the word household. So people living in the same unit or same residence. So concerning subdivided units, even though within one unit, there may be more than one household in it, but we still consider them one household so that they will not be subject to the impact of this restriction on multi-household gathering. Ms. Khan, any follow-up? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chan. So can I understand it this way? Now in 599G, concerning exemption of public place, we already have Section 5. So the CS4A has the power. For private premises, we can rely on the newly added 8D so that CSA can give exemption to some private premises. Another way is to add some premises to Schedule 1. And also some gatherings for certain purposes, they can be exempted. So restrictions in 599G are for the sake of allowing CE election to take place. That is one important goal. So there are ways to achieve that purpose. Can I understand it that way? Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. 8D. So in line with public interest, serves the public interest of Hong Kong. So for example, CE election, that also serves public interest of Hong Kong. Is that right? That's my first question. Yes, you can put it that way. Number two, as we all know, in some industries, for example, artists, they need a lot of grooming and hair salon, makeup services. And earlier on, they could not go to those premises for service. And there may be makeup artists or hairdressers going to their residences to offer them service. So this is a kind of work, but then they deliver the service at people's residence. Will these be exempted? Well, we have to look at the merits and actual circumstances of the case. If a person's work nature involves going to private premises to offer private services to people, for example, hairdressing, makeup service, and so on, then these can fall under gathering for work purpose. Can you point me to the particular provision, Schedule 1, the fourth item? Okay, so as emphasized, we have to look into each and every case. We have to consider the actual facts and merits. For example, the actual makeup artist, does she make a living by providing this service? We have to be very careful because we don't want anyone to abuse that provision, right? I believe these will be okay because we are talking about professional artists, okay? I would say that I understand why you want to relax or lift the restriction on hair salons. Even though I am worried, with only one jab taken, is that safe enough? So I will make these comments when we go to another provision. But we all understand that, let's say, haircuts for men, well, family members may not know how to do it. So people may have that need. For example, for politicians, even though we are not professional artists, but government officials always need to meet the public. Then for us, well, let's say for me, I cannot do any ponytail or pigtail or so on. So there may be these circumstances. For senior government officials, they always need to go out. So how can they make do? So can these cases be exempted? They do have the needs. I will nail down on the points specifically later on, but please answer this question first. Well, let's say LegCo members. In my case, I had my haircut before the restriction, so I can let my hair grow gradually, but then there may be some men or male counselors who may need the service. Thank you, Chairman. In our daily lives, apart from hairdressing, well, there may be other areas where we need people's help or we need other people to take care of. So we need to leave a certain degree of flexibility. We have been appealing to people to avoid unnecessary gathering. But then in relation to the restrictions on multi-household gathering, well, 2 households can gather. So let's say if there is a hairdresser who would like to deliver a hairdressing service at a customer's residence, well, this will not exceed the limit under the multi-household restriction. We understand that there may be artists, actors, actresses who need better grooming. They may have more needs. Then in those cases, home hairdressing and home beauty services involving more than one person, involving more than one household or multiple households, then you may refer to work gathering for work purpose. That section may apply, okay, for work purpose. Next, there are some elderly people who are able to afford hiring people to do haircut for them at their home, because we have been fighting the pandemic for a long time. Well, for counselors, of course, we have that need for work purpose. The same goes with actors and artists. And in some cases, households need cleansing service, but then not for medical purpose. If it is medical purpose, then surely you will accept that they need people to do cleansing service for them. I know that many elders need haircut service by others. They need grooming by others. Okay, back to the same concept. First of all, if the elders stay at home, then they are the first household, and the hairdresser constitutes the second household. And in this case, the multi-household restriction limit is not exceeded. Let's say if the elder needs more services, then we may have to refer to the situation. If the service has to involve more than one person, then the person working at that particular residence can be exempted under item 4. But then, Chairman, let me emphasize again, today the pandemic is really severe, so we would like to make an appeal to all members of the public. When it is not really necessary, please try your best to avoid group gathering. I absolutely agree with you. with only one jab taken, people can already go to hair salons. I am very worried because there are people whom I know who have taken one jab 10 days or 1 week ago, and then eventually they still could not fight the pandemic. They could not beat the pandemic. So one jab is really risky. It is high risk. So I have the responsibility to tell you about the cases that I handle. In those cases, those people have only taken one jab and they can't beat the pandemic. They actually lost their lives. So I think you need to do more study about this, okay? If there is no further question from members, then let's move on to the next clause, okay? 599L, right? Thank you. For 599L, it is LN 14. As the chairman said, this is a new ordinance, so we can refer to the marked up copy in 599L, Prevention and Control of Disease Vaccine Pass Regulation. Clause 3, 599L, authorizes the Secretary for Food and Welfare to issue vaccine pass to any category of premises or public transport carriers. In 3, bracket 2 and 3, there are some factors set out. These are factors that the Secretary has to consider when making such direction. And then in the latter part of clause 3, if the Secretary makes such a direction, he can ask the person in charge of the premises to do a number of things. For example, at the entrance, a notice in the specified format has to be put up, and then the person in charge needs to put in place some measures to make sure that the requirements under the vaccine pass can be implemented. And then next, in the vaccine pass direction, some factors can be included. For example, the age of the person vaccinated, his health condition, number of doses, and also date and place of the vaccination. The Secretary is empowered to require the persons not to enter some specified premises unless that person has been vaccinated in the specified manner. And then measures required by the Secretary need to be taken to make sure that only people who have been vaccinated in the specified manner will be allowed to enter the premises. And then number 5, these are some regulations or requirements for persons entering premises. If a person who has not been vaccinated in the specified manner, he cannot enter the premises. Sorry, please wait. Please wait. Now, 2 members have raised their hands. I need to talk to them about the procedure. If you want to speak about a certain provision, I will let you ask the questions right away. So I will first allow these 3 members to ask the questions first. Now we are examining the law clause by clause. First, Ms. Kong Yok Foon. Thank you, Chairman. My question is about section 5, 5(2)(c)(3). So here, there's an exclusion. Performing necessary repairs on the premises. Okay, necessary. This is rather general. How do we define necessary here? In some cases, things may not be necessary. This is rather vague wording. So to members of the public, it's not clear enough. The same goes with F. So necessary or essential for receiving essential government service. Who would define essential? Well, the public may find it essential, but not the law enforcers. G, if a person enters the specified premises for appearing as a party or a representative of a party, then what about jurors? They may not be a party or representative of a party to a legal proceeding. So does that mean that he cannot serve as juror? Thank you.
So I ask the Undersecretary to respond. Thank you for your question. So with regards to your previous question, just as our previous answer with regards to 599F, I mentioned that for some repair works, necessary repair works, for example, in a designated premise, say a restaurant, if regarding some of their fridges or some of the waterways, if they need people to enter that premise, if they are not vaccinated, our understanding is that the workers can nevertheless still go to the premises to conduct those necessary repair works. So when it comes to essential government services, well, I've responded to that when I was responding to the legal advisor's questions. For example, when citizens required to obtain certain business license registration, get a new ID card or a driver's license and etc. and other relevant government services. And regarding to legal proceedings, as we understand, if you are a member of the jury, you can enter those premises. We understand what Councillor Kong is suggesting, that in practical circumstances, there are many difficult circumstances, many different cases. So in this under parentheses 2K, if you have a lawful right or a reasonable excuse, then they could nevertheless enter the premises without getting vaccinated. Okay, so I'd like to ask, if you think that certain wordings are vague, if you have a better suggestion, you could propose that so that the government could consider it. So we welcome all constructive criticism. If you could clarify the wording so that the public would better understand what the law wants to achieve, that's great. So I say to all councillors, if you have a better wording, please suggest it. Next, Carmen Conway-Mann. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. So my understanding is that when we examine these provisions, is because just now the Bureau has gone up to Article 5. Yes, you could go backwards if you want. Like, I noticed that you guys raised your hand a bit too late. So if you have anything to comment about the previous provisions, you could talk about that. So examination provision by provision is really about a wording, right? So if you have good suggestions, please raise them now so that the government could look into it. And then, you know, we could have more time to consider it. So later on, if they talk about Article 6 to 8, we could still continue to talk about 5, right? Yes, that's possible. So let me get back to where we were before. I would like to ask, right now under Article 5, the vaccination pass, who would get the exemptions, particularly 5 parentheses 2. Just now you mentioned that some groups of people or people with certain aims in mind, they are exempt from the vaccine pass. So 5.2a is about age, 5.2b is about medical exemptions. So I'd like to invite the government to explain that are pregnant women covered under the medical exemption? So in other words, pregnant women have to have a vaccine pass. So what's the consideration behind that? Why are you not exempting pregnant women? So like what is your consideration? What are your priorities? Are you prioritizing protecting these people? You know, why are they not part of the medical exemption so that pregnant women could understand it? And at the same time, I understand that the labor laws, there are also recommendations to amend the labor laws if pregnant women are not vaccinated. That is no reason, that is not a reasonable reason to fire them. So if the pregnant woman is an employed pregnant woman, she does not have to worry about being fired for not getting a vaccine. But when it comes to these restriction on entering premises, like the restrictions do apply to them. Is that an appropriate understanding? Because under 522, they are not under 5 parentheses 2, they are not exempt. So under 52K, as long as a person have a legal right, or if they have a reasonable excuse, they do not need a vaccine pass to enter these designated premises. So could you offer us some example of, under 52K, like what types of cases apply under 52K? The third question is about 5 parentheses 3. So it mentions that there are certain exempted groups. Exempted groups, for example, people exempted due to medical reasons. It says there, if that person, due to medical reasons, is unable to offer the vaccination records to the manager of the premises, then they have to submit their personal information, address, and contact information to that manager of that premises. So those people, right, like I call them people who write on a paper, like after they have written on a paper, then now what limitations are imposed on the manager of their premises when it comes to protecting their privacy of their information? So I noticed that the legal advisor have asked that question to the Bureau. So the Bureau said that information that is not count as personal information, is not encrypted. So if you use a QR code, that's fine. Because it's not personal information. Like if the legal advisor thinks that misrepresented his or her position, please feel free to chime in. So for these people who are exempt, if they write on a paper, like how would we require the manager of those premises to protect the personal information? Should there be further guidelines by the Privacy Commissioner? So, Undersecretary, please. Thank you for your answer. Thank you for your question, Councillor Khan. So, with regards to the pregnant women's medical exemption, your understanding is correct, Councillor Khan. So, right now, for pregnant women should be protected. So, the 2 vaccines available in Hong Kong are both safe for pregnant women. So, if we balance the risks and the benefits, we encourage pregnant women to get vaccinated to protect herself and to protect her child. Some pregnant women, if they, for other reasons, they cannot get vaccinated, then similarly, they could consult their doctors, and after the doctor has diagnosed her, the doctor can issue a medical exemption. So that's what we are doing with regards to pregnant women. And secondly, when it comes to your question about writing on a piece of paper. So right now, in terms of implementing the vaccine pass, we have divided it into roughly 2 types of premises. One type of premises is premises that we have to proactively verify. These are high-risk venues like restaurants. For example, if you go there, you have to take off your face mask and eat. And the other type of premises is a passive. So, places with a lot of traffic and people do not take their face masks off when they're in them, like supermarkets and shopping malls. So these people who are not exempt, if they want to enter such premises, if they have to write on a piece of paper, we also ask the premises to retain the information for only 31 days properly. So if there are any urgency, if there's any sudden issue that arises, we would say in a restaurant, we would like to know who went there. And the QR code serves the same purpose, right? We would ask the people to retain the QR code information for only 31 days. So when people need to do track and trace at the FEHD, we could do that. But beyond the 31 days, we no longer need to retain such information. So that's why when it comes to, we have requirements about retaining information by restaurants. Where is that requirement stipulated? I don't really see it in the current law. I don't really see in this law what are the requirements are with regards to protection of their privacy. So that is written in the legal requirements issued by the Undersecretary under the laws pertaining and practices pertaining to the vaccine pass policy. So what about Article K? What is a lawful right and a reasonable excuse to not use the vaccine pass? Thank you for your counsel. Thank you for your question, Councillor. So a lawful right would be, for example, when officials, law enforcement officers have to enter a premises in order to carry out their duty, then they get to enter the premises despite not being vaccinated. And another reasonable excuse when we are introducing the vaccine pass, a lot of people have asked similar questions. If they pass through a shopping mall, if they have to pass through a shopping mall to go back to their house or go to the car park or go to work, we have listed that under our current policy, this counts as a reasonable excuse. Okay, thank you. Next, we have Councillor Tang Fei. Thank you, Chairman. So I'd like to ask, in the definition, it says designated premises. Do you refer to the exact same premises listed under the schedule of 599F? There's a very important issue here because these designated premises does not include schools. It does not include schools. So right now, when we are looking at these provisions, it says that it does not apply to children aged under 12. So not primary schools, but apply to secondary schools. So I would like to ask the Undersecretary, would you also consider listing secondary schools as designated premises or scheduled premises or whatever? I don't know what the wording is. So if it's necessary to list them as part of the scheduled premises, like where exam season is coming quite soon, like if secondary schools count, do we need to further amend the provisions, or could the Undersecretary achieve that just by exercising their rights, their powers? So that's something that the education sector would love to know and love to be clarified. And next, there is the manager or the person in charge of the premises or transport vehicle. So if the person in charge did not carry out their duties, do they bear any legal consequence as a result? So the Undersecretary, please. Thank you for your question, Mr. Tang. So with regards to the school issue that you raised, the vaccination requirement of going to schools, that's not part of the vaccine pass announcement that the Undersecretary is making right now. So right now, we are achieving these ends through administrative means. So you asked under the designated premise, is the designated premise the premises under 599S? Yes, under the current situation, yes. But we also have a flexibility. Let's say under the vaccine pass policy, we have to list any other policies which are not under 599F. We have the power to do that. So with regards to the person in charge, if they do not carry out the order or by the Undersecretary, what will happen? So if you look at Article 7, it says if the person in charge did not do what the Undersecretary asked him to do, then the punishment would be a 5-tier fixed fine and a maximum 6-month penalty in jail. So we also added parentheses 3, if the person in charge at that time has taken all reasonable steps possible, that would be an exemption. That would be a reason or an excuse. So next is my time. My first question, it's about Article 5, parentheses 2. I agree with what you're doing right now. Under labor laws for pregnant women, because we should not discriminate against any pregnant women. So we cannot say that we should fire pregnant women who are not vaccinated, because the law does not mandate vaccination. It is not a mandatory thing. But I would like to talk about this a bit more. As soon as you talk about the vaccination bubble, a lot of friends within my circle, they are educated people, middle-class people, and professionals. Only then did they start to get the first shot of their vaccination. So it's quite unfortunate. they can't get the second shot in time. They can't get it in time. So if you're confident that what you do is right, you have to make them do it unless you have a medical exemption.
So those people that I referred to just now, they still have not been vaccinated for the second dose. Some had already been vaccinated 3-4 weeks ago, so they are now very scared because they know that some people were in very bad condition. In K, well, I do not quite agree that, well, let's say there are civil servants, bailiffs who have law enforcement responsibilities. And I think they should be subject to the same requirements as ordinary members of the public. If they are not vaccinated, let's say for electrical staff, if they did not get the second jab if they do not get the second jab by April, then they cannot enter electrical premises unless if they can present medical proof. With the vaccination requirements, I believe that many people's lives can be saved. There are people who insist on not receiving vaccination in our team. And eventually they decided to get vaccinated because otherwise they cannot work in electrical building. So just now we looked at some examples. I don't know whether this is the same in the police or for law enforcement officers and medical workers. Then I do not agree. I believe that we are talking about saving lives. With the second jab, after 2 more weeks, then perhaps lives can be saved. We are competing with time. There are people who refuse vaccination, no matter how much we do to persuade them. And many people actually have not experienced problem after the first jab. So, okay, I think these people, as in the case of pregnant women, need a medical certificate waiver or exemption. Yes, we agree. We should try our best to encourage people to get vaccination to protect themselves. I think bailiffs are just one example. And if you consider civil servants and also public organizations, we already enforce vaccine pass requiring all employees to be vaccinated. Well, for example, electrical staff also needs to get vaccinated. So here we have put down this kind of reasonable excuse or power because these are some special examples. They may not need vaccination because the employers have not required, but they need to do things vested upon them by the law. But anyway, I do not agree. Even pregnant women are not exempted. I do understand that pregnant women are scared, but I know some pregnant women who rush to get vaccination nowadays. So you need to take up the responsibility. If there is anything unreasonable, you should voice it out. That's what I'm doing. So unless there is medical ground, otherwise people should not avoid vaccination. One jab is not useful. 1 month after one jab is still not safe. I think doctors are aware of that. I'm not a doctor, but I am working on so many cases and I have seen fatality. Those who have not got the second jab, okay, they are okay, they are physically well after the first jab. So now there are new infected cases, and these people have not been infected yet. You are giving some lawful exemption. So it seems that in your concept, bailiffs can also be exempted. I don't agree. I think we should give them a very positive instruction. That is, the only exemption is for medical grounds. So I think you need to narrow down the case, I don't think we can enjoy an exemption better than a pregnant woman with this kind of lawful authority or reasonable excuse. Yes, thank you, Chairman. We do agree that the exemption should be as narrow as possible. So we will go back to refer to the enforcement guidelines. So we will try our best to narrow down the reasonable excuse or lawful authority. So unless people have medical exemption, they should be vaccinated. Please be confident. People may not know the situation when they have to face death. They need others to tell them. So please be clear in your requirements and in your rules. Okay, next. Mr. Lam Siu Lo, thank you, Chairman. On 52C, on the enforcement, in Hong Kong, there are many composite premises. But then I understand that for specified premises, for example, shopping malls, department stores, these are also composite premises. For store premises on the ground level, well, very often there are retail, catering, and so on, all these functions together. So when 52C is enforced, I don't know how you're going to handle those mixed use premises. Well, the mixed use can be vertical. Oh, sorry, can be vertical. So that is, it can also be horizontal. So let's say first, second, third floor, maybe for different functions. You may say that licensing can clearly demarcate the use, but then in actual case, even the employees may not know the scope of the license, and members of the public won't be able to tell. So when you enforce the law, how can you differentiate among different areas or functions? On 52C, thank you, Chairman, on 52C, the exemption is purpose-based. So people may enter a certain premises to take away food, and they may want to pick up something, so they don't need to be vaccinated. But for the premises, I guess Mr. Lam's question is centered around the premises. So we're talking about scheduled premises. For scheduled premises, this arrangement has been in place for some time. And the merchant should know whether they are scheduled premises. So in 52C, the existing arrangement is not changed. Okay. Follow-up. Chairman, yes, a brief follow-up. I asked this question because I had some observations. I had seen some loopholes. With the use of vaccine pass, I believe when you enforce the law, there may be unnecessary disputes or conflicts as a result. Please think about these premises. In Hong Kong, it is not difficult to find these premises at all. So I'm worried about law enforcement. Right. Please reconsider after listening to Mr. Lam. Yes, thank you, Chairman. We'll consider Mr. Lam's views. We will be more detail-minded in terms of law enforcement. Ms. Kong Yu-Fun, second round. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, thank you for your reminder that we can offer suggestions for 5G. I have some suggestions. I do agree with the Chairman. This legal authority, we need to be careful and it should be sparingly used. You cannot make it unclear in 5 and so you rely on 5K. That is not desirable. For 5G, it is important in the court because we have to make sure that members of the public can receive legal service. We have to make sure that judicial operation will be smooth. So I suggest that 5G, the person enters or passes through the specified premises for appearing as a party or a representative of a party to any proceedings in any court, statutory tribunal or statutory board, or as a juror. Because usually in a legal proceeding, apart from jurors, there are expert witnesses, expert representatives, especially in the case of water leakage or seepage, there will be experts. So I suggest this amendment to make sure that judicial proceeding will be smooth and members of the public can get legal service. Thank you. PAS, any response? Well, I can make a response on policy, and then D/J colleagues can also respond on the wording. Well, we agree. Under G, any person who takes part in court proceedings can be exempted. So when I look at it, I think it includes those people mentioned by the councillor. Perhaps our D/J colleague can see whether the wording can be further enhanced. Okay, D/J colleagues. Thank you, Ms. Kong, for the question. We will go back to consider. Okay, Ms. Elizabeth Quat, first round. Chairman, on exemption, I support what you said just now. I believe vaccination is really important in protecting people's lives. So the exemption mechanism must be handled very carefully. I agree that apart from medical certificates or rushing to get vaccination, there should not be too many exemptions, because if there are a lot of exemptions, then members of the public will have a misunderstanding that it is okay not to be vaccinated. Some people can avoid vaccination. Some pregnant women had asked me about vaccination, and we have read a lot of medical literature. We have consulted many medical experts, and we also gave comments to the government. And eventually, we received very clear guidelines, and that is pregnant women can get vaccination. But then still today, there are some pregnant women who dare not get vaccination. There are now more pregnant women getting vaccination, but still there are some who are not brave enough to do that. So I guess the message is not clear enough. I think the government should do more about education and publicity. If there are too many exemptions and not clearly explained, I am worried that the public will have misunderstanding. So I agree with you, Chairman. Government officials should be more specific here and make things clearer and tighter so that there won't be too many exemption cases. In F, receiving essential government service. How come such case can be an exemption? You need to protect civil servants and other people who receive government service. Okay. PAS, thank you, Chairman. On pregnant women, we do encourage them. There are professional medical organizations who had issued public letters encouraging pregnant women to go for vaccination. So we agree with the councillor. Okay, please go back to examine the case, because at the end of the day, I will follow up on the wording and the scope. Next, Ms. Carmen Can. Thank you, Chairman. After listening to members' concerns, well, when this law is drafted, the transmission of Omicron BA2 and the hazards of it, well, when this law is drafted, perhaps things are not clear yet. So when we consider all the exemptions under 5.2, I guess too many exemptions have been provided. As Ms. Quat just said, for government service, we also need to protect civil servants who deliver the service. When you receive service, if you can get exemption, then this is one example of what I'm saying. So, Chairman, your point is very clear. I think there should be as fewer exemptions as possible. because with our latest understanding of this variant, we need to review all the exemptions. This is my broad suggestion. Then if you go into 52H, 52H points to number 6. That is the Secretary for Food and Health. Well, the CE's approval has to be obtained for the sake of government operation and public interest. So I think this is quite similar with 599G about group gathering. So in 52H, the Secretary with the CE's approval is allowed to exempt some essential government operation and public interest. Vaccine pass is not needed. So what are the thoughts behind such exemption?
So under K, we have to look at it in conjunction with Article 20. So if we do that, just now it mentions that if you have to go through a shopping mall, that is a reasonable excuse unless you go to work. Article 20 says that if you work there, you are not subject to exemption. That's why you are subject to the limitations on Article 20. Is that the only situation? So as I've heard the Secretary said that could you tighten the controls by the means of enforcement guidelines? Perhaps that might not be the ideal way to do that. Like as we understand Omicron BA2 better and better, is there something better we could do? So Under Secretary, thank you for your recommendation, Councillor Khan. So your understanding is correct, Councillor Khan. Under parentheses H, you have to look at Article 6. So the Undersecretary, after obtaining approval from the Chief Executive, you could designate certain things, certain exemptions. That is also a very narrow exemption. It must be necessary for government's function and other public interest and extremely unique circumstances. So civil servants already have to get a vaccine. That's a requirement. So I don't think they are they are at risk when it comes to serving the public. So we have some examples. For example, non-civil servants or people who are not Hong Kong people, like experts from the mainland, for example, if there is a need for them to enter certain premises to do certain things which are within the public interest, and it just so happens that they are not completely vaccinated under the current requirements, we have to offer an exemption for those type of situations and those people so that they could enter the premises in order to perform their functions. But that is a very narrow exemption. So that's the original policy intention. So it's my follow-up. I would like to follow up on 5G and K. It's actually both about the exemptions, but I've looked at some of the information. My understanding is that right now, all civil servants needs to be vaccinated, right? When it comes to, your vaccine pass, you have to scan that vaccine pass. So what if there's no way to scan that vaccine pass when you are trying to enforce the law? They are exempt, like they are vaccinated, they just haven't scanned the vaccine pass, and that's when the exemption would apply to them. Is my understanding correct? Because this is newly minted information that that was made available to me. So for example, the law enforcement officer, they should be vaccinated, but it's just that when they are carrying out that mission, and for that mission, they have to access a certain premises. And in that case, they do not have to scan their vaccine pass. Is my understanding correct? Thank you, Chairman. So your understanding is okay, is correct. If he or she enters that premises, there might be some very urgent things that needs to be done, right? Yes, that may include policemen or etc. But those people, they are definitely vaccinated, right? Like if you're employed by the government, you must get vaccinated except for medical exemptions. So some other people, they may not fall into that purview, like the experts that you've mentioned or etc. I would really like you to, what we're doing here is saves lives. This is 100% true. Encourage them to get vaccinated. unless it's medical exemptions. Like I encourage several people to get vaccinated, and they go to consult their doctor. They cannot get the exemption. Then in the end, they reluctantly got a shot. So I hope that they would get a second jab soon as well. So my second point is this lawful right is a very broad scope, right? How could you supplement that? I really agree with what people say that during the 20th of February, no one knew that Omicron was such a powerful variant, and we hope that we could reduce the amount of infected because to make sure that the pandemic subsides. Like this is 5,000 is a very terrifying figure. Like I think you should consider the councillors' recommendations and narrow down this matter. Like do people have misunderstandings about your vaccine and your recommendations and your laws? Like, I hope that those people would change their minds, or perhaps there's too many news reports out there, and that's why people have a misunderstanding. But now, of course, people know it's about numbers, it's about science. So, Councillor Kong Yok Fun, so Chairman, if you have any opinions about other sections, when could we raise them? So we're moving on to that. Like if this is examination provision by provision. If there's no problem with the provision, we will pass those provisions. So next one, please. Thank you, Chairman. Just now, we were talking about the Articles 5 to 7. So now I will move on to Article number 8 and continue to explain things to our councillors. So Article number 8 empowers these people in charge when they are enforcing the vaccine pass, what powers do they have? So the persons in charge of these premises, they could require these people who enter the premises to submit those records for his examination. And if the Undersecretary so requires, the person in charge could require these people to scan their QR code on the mobile app that the government has rolled out. So thirdly, if the person in charge so requires, if the government so requires, the person in charge could upload these personal information onto the designated system the government provides. So as I mentioned, this is for the sake of tracking and tracing. I have two councillors who raised their hand to ask about this provision. So it's Councillor Elizabeth Quat. Yes, I'd like to ask about Article 7, parentheses 3. So why don't you raise your hand when we're up to Article 7? Now we're on number 6. So what about Councillor Kan Wai Man? Chairman, just now they were talking about Article 8, right? Can we talk about 7 and 8 together? Okay, I understand. So how about this? We would just ask question about Article 6 to 8, right, altogether. So Elizabeth Quat, please. Thank you, Chairman. I see that under Article 7, parentheses 3, just now, you're asking these persons in charge to follow the vaccine pass direction. They have to retain a machine, a device. So it says that adopting all reasonable measures to comply with the law. What if they lose that device? Right now, the information is stored in a mobile phone. If they lose the device, lose the mobile phone, the information is gone. There's no more tracking and tracing. Is losing your phone a defense in this regard? So let me talk about what is meant by reasonable steps. So we have to refer past cases. So if the person in charge of the premises, they have put out the machine and they have adopted all reasonable steps to make sure that the machine is still there, but it so happens the machine broke down or the machine is lost, I think that would be a reasonable defense. But if it's intentional, if they intentionally make the machine inoperable, then when it comes to enforcing the law, we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis to see what the intention behind their actions were. So I'm a bit worried Chairman, would this become a loophole if there are certain people or certain shops, their persons in charge deliberately break the machine or deliberately lose their machine? It's very difficult to prove their intention one way or the other. So the system itself, I've always thought, such loopholes have always existed, right? Like because you don't upload that data, you just keep the data within that particular terminal or device. That the device would be broken, would be lost, it would be lost deliberately, or it would be destroyed deliberately. So under those circumstances, how would the government handle that? If the devices, if you say that a lost device and a broken device, that is a reasonable defense, we are worried that a lot of these devices will be lost or broken. So Councillor Elizabeth Quath has proposed a very good, asked a very good question. So could you think about this? So Chairman, as you know, that certain establishments, when it comes to Leave Home Safe app, they, how shall I put it? They deliberately discourage their clients to use these Leave Home Safe app, and they're very lenient when it comes to filling out their personal information on a piece of paper. They deliberately refuse to cooperate, and that may persist, right? Is the government concerned about that loophole? And could the law be written in a clearer manner to increase the force of the deterrence? Well, if it is proven that if there's evidence of deliberate tampering or deliberate or lying, that of course would be illegal. Is that correct, Mr. Secretary? Yes, Councillor. A simple response to Councillor Quat's question. So under the current vaccine pass direction, it starts with these restaurants. So we have frontline staff from the FEHT to make sure that these establishments which serve food and drink to have those machines, and those machines are functional. They cannot just say that the machines are lost or non-functional when we require them. So during our day-to-day spot checks, we are able to make sure that the persons in charge of these establishments comply with our directions. So it's clearly stipulated here. They would break the law if it's malicious. Yes. So we need to remind the public about that, because we have such experiences. Some people do deliberately destroy these things, and they have to bear the criminal responsibility. Common Conway Man. Thank you, Chairman. I really agree with what Elizabeth Quat just said. If we depend on the establishment to hold on to the device because of the existing design of the vaccine pass system, each establishment has that device. It's not provided by the Bureau. You just download the designated app for the VP app. So there are all sorts of devices out there, and based on the short clip which demonstrated how it's used, you just clip the machine onto the front door of your establishment. So there's a danger there. So on Article 7, parentheses 2, it clearly says that if the person in charge cannot do that, if they contravene subsection 1, and they would be liable, and unless they have adopted all reasonable measures. So there's a huge amount of gray area here. And some establishments also inform me that if they are the person in charge of that establishment, they have a lot of responsibilities. And as what Elizabeth Quat says, some people do it deliberately, right? How do you prove that? Even if you ask for a reasonable measures, is losing something reasonable or not? How do we know? So there are a lot of imperfections in this current system. So we hope that the Bureau and the government do not think of this vaccine pass measure as the be-all and all. When we are doing tracking and tracing and pathology tracking, we have to track and trace the actual person and name that person. So this is just a temporary measure which is already in place. But ideally, including the experts, experts from the mainland, including the chairman of the hospital authority. They would say that from a pathological perspective, it was much better if the app it allows for tracking and tracing. When it comes to operation, there's so many problems, right? Like the device would be hacked, the device might be lost. There are many things that could happen. That's my view on Article 7. On Article 8, about scanning of the QR code. So recently, people who are from the mainland coming back to Hong Kong or people coming to Hong Kong overseas, they are facing a lot of practical issues when it comes to operating this system. Now, people have already canceled the downloading of this app at the FEHD. You could get registered at one of the 18 post offices or get registered when you enter our borders. Because of the Omicron variant, we discourage people from going out and about. For people who live in Hong Kong but without a Hong Kong passport, they may face practical concerns, right? They don't want to go to the post office, so they have to hold on to their vaccination records in order to access various establishments. And when it comes to implementation and operation, how can we help our citizens?
Is there any high-tech way to solve this problem? Secretary and PAS. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Tan, for your comments. Some time ago, we had a QR code. When people come into Hong Kong, they are given a QR code for use. And other people will have to go to the post office. We have simplified the post office declaration process, hoping that it can be completed as soon as possible. Well, in CHP's website, can there be something to be downloaded? How come that function is no longer there? When we worked on the vaccine bubble, there was that function. At that time, people could upload themselves. However, when vaccine pass is included in the law, then there is a criminal obligation. So that means people have to go to the post office to have their identities verified. So it seems that this is a matter about technology, right? In the post office, an officer needs to use his naked eye to verify the identity. Well, actually, residents can upload the proof themselves, and then there can be verification at the back end. This is a matter of identity verification. If people don't go to the post office, if they hold on to a non-local vaccination proof, in restaurants, they can still show that proof to restaurant employees to enter the premises. So they do not really need to hang on to a QR code. But if residents want to enter a premises easier, then QR code is one way. Any other questions? Now when the virus is so fatal, people will have to queue up at post office. Otherwise, they will have to carry the paper vaccine pass when they go out. Otherwise, there'll be difficulty entering the premises. You need to understand that there are many members of the public in this kind of situation. Some may be from the mainland, some may be from overseas, and the vaccine record can only be verified in the post office. And this is not a good measure. Otherwise, they have to carry the papers, or else they will be breaking the law. There will be criminal liability. Thank you, Councillor, for your comments. We have heard you. We said in the last meeting that vaccine pass has only been in place for some time. We will enhance the overall implementation and law enforcement process to convenience the public. And we will work on how to further make things convenient for people holding on to overseas vaccine pass to enter premises. It's like RAT. So we need to make better use of technology to do back-end verification. Instead of using the most traditional method, there shouldn't be the need for person-to-person, person-on-person verification. Okay, I want to make a point here. In the past 3 weeks, I received post office employees saying that there is serious outbreak in the post office. So I think people need to be very careful when they go to the post office. We need to protect post office staff as well. So you need to check people's face. Can this be done on Zoom? I think in the coming 6 weeks, we all know that we are talking about saving lives. So there are people who return from overseas, and if they are required to go to the post office, then there are big risks on both sides. In some cases, documents cannot be dispatched in a timely manner. In post office, there is a big outbreak. Many people have been infected. So for sure, there is the relevant technology. We're talking about 2022. Facial recognition is very simple. Facial recognition is already widespread. People can recognize faces on Zoom. I think that will be better protection for both parties. I think you should consider, since 10th February, many post offices are in big difficulty during the pandemic and they are seeking help. There was large outbreak. So can you think of the wording? This is a very practical issue. Next, number 9, section 9. Thank you, Chairman. Section 9, powers to deny entry or boarding, etc. by authorized officers and persons in charge. When those people have not been vaccinated for the required doses. So for example, police officers, authorized officers, they can ask those persons to leave the premises. And if entry fees have already been paid, there is not the need to refund the entry fees to those people involved. And then section 10, requirements for responsible persons for vulnerable persons. For vulnerable person, it means those under 12, children under 12, and those who are mentally disordered or mentally incapacitated. Now, for children under 12, there is not the requirement of vaccine pass. So section 10 is mainly about mentally incapacitated person. The carers need to get the required doses of vaccine in order to enter the scheduled premises. And then starting from part 3, part 3 is on enforcement powers. In other subsidiary legislations of 599, these enforcement powers are similar, so I can be brief. Section 11, sorry, please wait. Ms. Kong Yok Fun, which section you would like to comment on? Section 10, okay. Yes, please. So concerning responsible persons for vulnerable persons, I want to know regarding children and those who may need people to take care of. Well, sometimes these people are not accompanied by parents or guardians to the doctors. Sometimes the carers may be other relatives or domestic helpers. So if the responsible persons are only parents, let's say if there is an unobedient, disobedient domestic helper, she takes the vulnerable person to a premise and he has not, or he or she has not been vaccinated, but you only penalize the parents. Or if the scope only includes parents, this is too narrow. There are many people who take care of vulnerable persons. If those people are disobedient, they do not scan their code, and then parents need to be held responsible. This is not fair. In 10.1, a responsible person for a vulnerable person must use the responsible person's best endeavors. Best endeavors, this is too vague. I know that it is hard to amend this, but I think the Bureau needs to be careful. Just now, many councillors pointed out that these sections in many cases are too vague, too broad. Okay, thank you. PAS, thank you, Ms. Kong, for your comments. responsible person, well, counselor's understanding is correct. Responsible persons refer to parents, adopted parents, and step parents. This is about legal liability, so we cannot include everybody like domestic helpers and other carers. But then the principle behind is if the parents or step parents, well, they have the ultimate responsibility for the vulnerable persons. So when they hand over the vulnerable persons to the daily carers, they have to make sure that the carers will comply with the vaccination requirements. Okay, I have a follow-up question. Can we add something in section 10? Many parents need to work. They may not be able to take their children out. So can you add a subsection if the parents have already instructed those carers, then they are not liable. Otherwise, this will be a big problem. That is in bracket 1. So best endeavors, that is already a defense. If the parents have already given instructions, but the domestic helper has not listened to the instruction, then we are of the view that the parents have made their best endeavors already. Okay. Best endeavors, right? In English, right? Correct. I am also an employer. So I think most employers will be very serious with giving instruction and briefing the carers with enough publicity work on your side. However, for the immediate persons responsible for the act, the problematic act, those people should also be liable, right? Let's say if people who do not wear safety belts, well, the employers will be in trouble. So if these people themselves have to pay $400, they will always remember to put on safety belt. So can we say and stroke or vicarious liability? I'm an employer, definitely at the end of the day, I will be held liable. And we don't want to see such problem from happening. But then for the immediate person, we don't know whether he has malicious motive, whether he has conflict with employers. There are many such cases in the Labor Department. So can he be held liable as well? For example, can he also be punished or fined if there are disputes, if the domestic helpers want to take revenge on the employers? Sometimes we come across such cases. So can we say and stroke or? So we can add in the point that the person, the immediate carer should also be responsible. Parents cannot evade from the responsibility because well, if they have entrusted the vulnerable persons to someone not trustworthy, then there will be vicarious liability on them. This is for sure. Okay, PAS, can this be considered? Chairman, I agree that in terms of enforcement, in relation to publicity, the domestic helpers will know that they have the responsibility. The employers will tell them about this legal liability. We can explain more in our publicity so that the immediate carers are aware of this legal requirement. I think the Labor and Welfare Bureau and also the counselors should be disseminating such information to the domestic helpers as well. Ms. Kan, on this same section, yes. I echo what you said just now. Can we change best into reasonable endeavors? If you say best endeavors, well, if you refer to, let's say, sections 5 and other sections of this law, usually reasonable endeavor is used. For responsible person, parents will be the target. As Ms. Kong and Chairman said, I think this is a very sound, valid problem or issue. So can our legal advisor help to explain? Legal advisor, please. What do you think? Yes. Let's ask the administration whether they can change best endeavors into reasonable endeavors. I think reasonable endeavors is rather common legally.
So people will understand it's the third reasonable person. So Chairwoman, let me offer a simple response to see if our draftsmen have anything to add. So in under Article 10, parentheses 3, we have a reasonable excuse provision. So that is able to handle the councillors' concerns. Department of Justice, anything to add? Would you look into this matter? I think in the end, this is a policy issue. We have heard your recommendation. We would look into the matter. Yeah, that's great. Look into it. So we're just worried, like, what if people deliberately make the employer liable, right? We don't want to incentivize people to do such things. So next, number 3, continue. So we're talking about Part 3, Article 11, and now we move on to Part 3, Article 12, powers to obtain information. So authorized person, in order to carry on the duties under these provisions, if they feel that there is information that they have to obtain, that they could, under this law, ask the relevant people to provide assistance. And Article 13, with regards to the power to obtain information pertaining to alleged crimes. So we authorize these authorized persons, if they know that there are people who broke the law, they could ask those people to provide their personal information, and they could also take away any relevant evidence for subsequent legal proceedings. So Article 14, we authorize certain authorized persons to enter certain premises. So within a reasonable time frame, they could enter there are certain premises to conduct checks and investigations. And they are also authorized to copy down certain information. And Article 15, so under certain unique circumstances, if they have to enter certain premises in order to conduct investigations, then the magistrate could issue a writ in order to empower an authorized person to enter such premises. So Article 16, obstruction of authorized officer. So Under Secretary, our assistant legal advisor has a question. Legal advisor, please. Thank you. So I want to ask about Article 15. Under Article 15, the power to enter a premises with a writ, so with a warrant. So how could this law be in accordance with 15 parentheses 1 or 7 parentheses 1? How does this power relate to those two articles I quoted, 15 parentheses 1 and 7 parentheses 1? So Chairman, basically, the power listed here authorize these authorized officers to enter certain premises to see if these premises have retained the vaccination records of people who entered their premises, like the QR code information we just mentioned, or have they left the records, or have they complied with our requirements? So these few provisions authorize these authorized officers with various powers. So we have explained to the legal advisor saying that what situations do we mean here? So these situations The authorized officer has the obligation to explain these various situations to the magistrate, and only if the magistrate agrees that there is a need would the magistrate issue a search warrant. Any follow-up? No follow-up questions. Thank you. So Article 16. So Article 16 says that if there's obstruction of authorized officers carrying out their duties, then Article 16 stipulates that this is a crime and there would be a 3-tier fine applicable. So if there are no further questions about Part 3, we will go down to Part 4. So Section 17 says, as about the medical exemption certificate that councillors have asked about. And it stipulates what information must be included in the medical certification, like the format, time, and date, etc. So the secretary has already issued a letter with regards to this particular format to medical practitioners in the town, and right now they will follow to adhere to this format. So next, wait a moment, please. 2 councillors raised their hands. Firstly, Councillor Kong Yuk Foon. So, Chairman, I would like to talk about Article 19. Wait a moment then. Wait a moment. We are not on Section 19 yet. So, Carmen Carwayman. Chairman, I'd like to ask about Section 11. Enforcement authorized officers. So for authorized officers, if I looked at the schedule, there are 49 different types of authorized officers. In other words, who does the government authorize it? To ask the premises to access their device, or shall we say access the relevant data? Of course, this is for the sake of tracking and tracing in order to trace these cases. So here it says that under Section 11, parentheses 3, if these authorized officers do or not do certain things in good faith, that would be an exemption from legal responsibility. And under parentheses 4, of course, the authorized officer does not bear responsibility. The government takes collective responsibility. So what controls do we have in place on these authorized officers? Because the authorized officers in this process, they have the authority to submit this information to the undersecretary, and what they could do, what they could not do. Let's explain to the public. Can they de-encrypt this information? Could they access and look at the information of these citizens? And what are the internal controls in place? That's the first question. And secondly, under Section 12, parentheses 5, it talked about the people in these premises. If they do not comply with the authorized officers, they would have a they would break the law, right? Parentheses like they would have 3-tier fine, like in other words, $10,000. So that's just a fine, right? So to the premises, there is no risking of jail time. There's just a fine. And Article 5, it also talks about Article 5 also talk about exemption from liability. Is this similar to Article 7? Why do you have to write it down again, right? If you have reasonable measures taken, then why are we writing this again in parentheses 5? So those are my questions. Thank you. So with regards to Section 11 that Councillor Khan has mentioned, so who could have access to this information? When we answered the question proposed by the legal advisor, we have said that if this information, if and when it's necessary for contact tracing, then the information will be delivered in an encrypted manner, and you cannot see the information during the process of transferal, and it will be uploaded onto a designated government cloud in an encrypted form. So only several designated officers in the Department of Health would have access to this information for the sake of prevention and control of disease. So the frontline officer who was authorized under normal circumstances, what they were responsible for is asking the premises to do certain things and to check on if whether or not they have done that, but they cannot gain access to the information. So, for example, they would just get the device and they could do all these things, but they cannot de-encrypt the information. The de-encryption will be done by somebody else. It's not the responsibility of these 49 categories of officers. Yes, that's correct. They don't really need to obtain the device. As previously explained, my understanding is that they would have a password or a specific requirement to ask the person in charge of the premises to follow their instructions and upload the information onto a designated government website. So the authorized officer doesn't really have to take away the device. So we have to exempt these people from liability as a result. So what I want to know is, why are you exempting these people from liability under Section 11, parentheses 3? So usually this is a broader scope, right? It's not referring to what you're just describing, because the authorized person, when they conduct spot checks, when they conduct investigations, or when they are enforcing the law, issuing fines, if they see that someone who is not vaccinated enter a premises, they have to ask that person to leave or have to issue a fine. They have to do a lot of things day to day. So we want to exempt them from personal liability. But this does not impact the fact that the government has to take collective responsibility. So we have handled that in Section 11, parentheses 4. Councillor Kong Yuk Foon, which section do you want to ask about? So let me start with my question first. So Councillor Kan Wai Man, do you have anything to follow up on? I'm sorry. I'm talking about Section 12, parentheses 4 and 5. The DOJ or the government representatives, could you explain that a little bit? So under Section 7, it already says that the person in charge, if they have adopted all reasonable steps, they would be exempt from liability. Could the Undersecretary explain that? DOJ, perhaps? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that right now. You are talking about Section 7. They're talking about reasonable, there's already a exemption there. So let me repeat, like perhaps your connection's better now. Yes, just now, halfway, my screen froze. Like I heard that what you are mentioning Section 7. So let me repeat. So under Section 7, it already says that the person in charge, in terms of exemption from liability, it says that as long as they adopt all reasonable steps. Oh, it also says that 6 months of jail time and a tier 5 fine. So for the person in charge. So that's Section 7. If you compare that with Section 12, no, like how is the scope of Section 12 different from the Section 7 scope, like parentheses 4 and 5 in Section 12? So under Section 12, yeah, we hear you clearly. We hear you clearly. Please go ahead. So Section 12, it's about the authority pertaining to obtaining information and investigation. So these authorized officers, if they have cause or if they know that these people have information, they could ask them to submit that information and provide that information. So that situation is slightly different from Section 7, because Section 7 is about the people in charge have to follow the vaccine pass directions. So if the permanent undersecretary says that if the government mandates the people to scan the QR code in accordance with the vaccine pass direction, that would fall under the purview of Section 7. But Section 12 would be these authorized officers, when they are asking these persons in charge for information, or if they are asking any other citizens to provide information, that would fall under the purview of Section 12. So, Councillor Khan, do you have any recommendations or questions? So I think from the legal perspective, because we are holding these persons in charge criminally liable, and we are holding these employees on those premises criminally liable, so we have to clearly tell the public what liability could they bear. So do you mean that Section 7 is about whether or not the person in charge follow the entire direction? If the government is trying to roll out the vaccine pass directive, have they followed the Section 4 requirements? If they have not, then they would be subject to Tier 5 fines and 6 months of jail unless they adopt all reasonable steps. That's directed at the boss, at the person in charge, right? And Section 12 says that when the authorized officers, as what the government has explained, like they may be from the Department of Health or etc., when they access a certain premises, they ask the certain employee. So at that time, it may not be the person in charge; it could be an employee. Whether or not the employee complies with the authorized officers' requirements, if they do not comply, they would be less. They will not be punished as severely. It would be a Tier 3 fine unless they have a reasonable explanation. Can you explain clearly? Will different people be subject to different legal consequences?
T of J. Okay, thank you for the question. Your understanding is correct. Section 12 is such that any person can be questioned, and the responsibility is to provide information. And for Section 7, it is about vaccine pass. So these two are different. Section 12 is in response to question and to provide information. Okay, Chairman. So up to this point, it seems that overall speaking, we are putting in a lot of effort to work on vaccine pass. As you know, in Hong Kong, there are so many 599F premises. They have to work according to this requirement. And the person in charge may be subject to 6-month imprisonment and Tier 5 fines. And people who are asked for information may have to be subject to a fine of $10,000 just for the sake of vaccine pass. So much responsibilities are placed on the premises. Can we listen to people's views? Can we do contact tracing so that the original objective of the vaccine pass being encouraging vaccination should be better served? If you want to do contact tracing, then please do contact tracing. And vaccination is another thing. Just do what you want. These two are not mutually exclusive, but then please don't go via vaccine pass. Well, so much is being done still. There are people who may inadvertently fall into the legal trap, or there may be unsatisfactory law enforcement. Thank you. Well, this is a comment, and this is also about policies. I think the government has heard your points. 10th of February is different from now in Hong Kong. So I think laws have to have deterrent effect. Otherwise, people won't be serious. There are reasonable excuses and defense. I think Hong Kong people all know that we are in dire situation. We need to build a firewall together to fight the pandemic. And I think the administration has heard your points on room for improvement. Those are about policies. In the future, if there is the contact tracing function or named system, then things will be more convenient. We have made those points in panel meeting many times. So, Ms. Elizabeth Quarter, which section you want to comment on? Chairman, I have a question for the administration. For example, mandatory enforcement. Well, if there are people who deliberately damage the machines, not the person in charge, not employees, but there are other people who deliberately damage those machines, storing vaccine pass data, or they steal information from the machines. Are there any provisions in the law to govern that, or you are going to use the dishonest use of computer law? So up to this stage, I haven't seen any provision on this point. PAS, thank you, member, chairman. So your observation is correct. In this vaccine pass regulation, it is mainly about people entering the premises and also the persons in charge and their responsibilities. So for deliberate damage or theft, we have other laws in Hong Kong which can handle this kind of acts. Right. Chairman, we know that dishonest use of the computer, that law has some limitation. If you treat that law as a multifunctional key, well, that won't be valid. So if you want this vaccine pass requirement to be effective, you have to guard against people's deliberate damage of the computer or deliberate theft of information and data by hackers, for example. So shouldn't you add a heavy penalty here to guard against such acts? Otherwise, these acts are not dealt with in this law. There will be people who may be doing those. So there are people who may deliberately damage other people's things or steal people's data. So I think to members of the public, there is the need for further protection. Fighting the pandemic is important. So that's why we have to do some prevention. Yes, any response, PAS? Thank you, Councillor. We can work with the IT office to see how we can guard against hacking or deliberate damage or better protect data. We'll see how we can enhance legal protection. Yes, please review it. It will be helpful to add a heavier penalty in this section to enhance deterrent effect. Ms. Kwok's view is very good. If we always make use of the dishonest use of computer law, very often we won't be able to prosecute people effectively. So for the sake of public health, if there is a provision that can be enforced more easily, it will be good. So please go back to consider. Section 18, you refer to a standard form. Can we find that standard form? The standard form with doctors? Yes. There should be a form downloadable, right? The standard form has been sent to all doctors in Hong Kong, and on the website, this form is also available. It is electronic. If doctors use the e-record system, then there is already this electronic version of the form. I believe doctors are aware, but I also want members of the public to know. It's like privacy commission. We can download the form easily. So people may have to queue up to see the doctor, and then we are talking about the same thing. Not all doctors have picked up things effectively. So can we see the form? People then can refer to the form and know that they have done the right thing. I am speaking from residents' point of view because residents have to submit that. Yes. Section 19, Ms. Kong Yuk Foon. PAS, please. Please brief us. Section 18 is on fixed penalty. So for Section 18, there are some specific arrangements related to the schedule, so I won't waste your time about the schedule. Section 19, defense, as mentioned by Ms. Kong just now. I'll see whether DFJ has anything to add, but then for Section 19, it is on contrary proof beyond reasonable doubt. Okay, let me stop here and see whether Ms. Kong has questions. Ms. Kong Yuk Foon. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. In Section 19, defense. So a person has to confirm two things. First, there is sufficient evidence to raise an issue with respect to that matter. And B, beyond reasonable doubt, to be proved by the prosecution. I'm not a criminal lawyer, but then regarding criminal law, usually B, beyond reasonable doubt is the most important. In other laws, apart from 599, is there the same requirement that there is sufficient evidence to raise an issue with respect to that matter? I know that, for example, there are similar provisions in 599G. So D of J, can you let us know whether there is the same requirement as in A in other laws of Hong Kong? Before D of J comments, we need to extend this meeting. So I will exercise my discretion as a chairman to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. We will try our best to examine the clauses and see how far we can go. D of J. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Kong, for your question. Section 19 is a standard provision. The policy is to ask for evidential burden, and usually the standard provision will be used. Not only in 599, but this provision can be seen in many other laws. If someone wants to exercise a defense, then what he needs to prove is up to this extent. He only needs to produce evidence to raise an issue. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kong. I want to refer to the Chinese version. For English, we all understand what is meant by beyond reasonable doubt as long as we have studied law. For the Chinese version, well, perhaps because I am teaching law as well, I think this same translation is used in other clauses as well, but then this is not a good rendition to the general public. So we say 100% doubtless. There is no doubt 100%. It's not proved by the prosecution beyond reasonable doubt in English. This is easy. But then in Chinese, the rendition is rather clumsy. So please check the Chinese version. By common law, we all know that it should be beyond reasonable doubt in criminal cases. So this is not explicitly stated in all cases. We all know that for criminal cases, the standard has to be beyond reasonable doubt. We all know that. So for the Chinese version, we need to make sure that the public can understand. In 91 to 97, I was a member of the Bilingual Law Reform Commission. And sometimes the Chinese version is not easily understandable by the public. So when we discuss law in Chinese, we say there is no doubt at all, 100%, or evidence is 100% in place. So you have to make sure that things are understandable easily. I think the Chinese rendition is not desirable. Please go back and check. Perhaps you can review the crimes ordinance to see where this same translation is used. People won't understand by reading the Chinese version. They have to refer to the English version. Okay? So I have a reservation in the Chinese rendition. We always scrutinize law, and usually this common law principle is not often explicitly written in the statute. So please take note of it. We just want the public to understand, not only the lawyers. Okay? Administration, please go back to review. I am not happy with the Chinese rendition. Section 20. Section 20. circumstances not constituting reasonable excuse under Section 52K. So workplace, for example, if a person enters premises for work reason, he has to get vaccination. So work is not a reasonable excuse. And then Section 21, director may specify form of documents. Section 22, expiry. This regulation expires at the end of this year.
So, Chairman, that's all I have for my introduction. Thank you. So let us get through this provision first. Does anybody have any further opinions? Well, we hope that you could look into our opinions by our councillors to see how you could improve. So next, we will go to the next provision. It's 599J. So thank you. Now we are going to look at 599J, prevention and control of disease, through the legal notice of number 15 in year 2022, prevention and control of disease, compulsory testing for certain persons amendment. The amendments in this law has already taken effect on the 12th of February. The amendments mainly is about what happens under compulsory testing for certain persons. We would raise the fine from 5,000 to 10,000. So the amendment we made is has amended the Section 24 under Cap 599J. We have changed the fine of 5,000 to 10,000. That's all. Thank you. If there are no input, no input. This is a very simple affair. So if there's no any input from our councillors, we would go to 241N. So thank you. So the emergency exemption from statutory requirements is found in the legal notice of 23 of year 2022, and it has taken effect on February, the 24th of February, year 2022. So there is no marked up version of this law. This is a brand new law. So we would go through this provision in accordance with the legal notice. So the first one is about the commencement date. As I mentioned, that this regulation comes into operation on 24th of February in year 2022. And Section 2 says the Chief Secretary could grant exemption from the requirement under enactment. So parentheses 1, it says, what are the specified purpose for this exemption? And parentheses 2 says the Chief Secretary, when for the purposes of subsection 1, what the factors must he or she consider. And parentheses 3 says that an exemption under this regulation may be subject to any condition specified by the Chief Secretary. And parentheses 4 says the Chief Secretary may cancel or vary an exemption under this regulation or a condition specified under subsection 3. Parentheses 5 clarifies what specific disease refers to under parentheses 1. So we are, of course, specified disease is COVID-19 2019. So when it comes to Section 3, it says that by order of the Chief Executive and Council, if they want to repeal the law in part or in whole, it would not affect the effect of an exemption under this regulation or anything duly done under such an exemption. So under Secretary, I have raised my hand. Right now, I also have 3 councillors with questions. Firstly, I'd like to ask everybody for your agreement. If you do not object, we would extend this meeting by 15 minutes to see depending on how far we are going along. And secondly, when we are scrutinizing this law, when a lot of people have questions, I've said that I have promised that our councillors would get an opportunity to ask their questions when it comes to this emergency exemption from statutory requirements. So I will allow everyone to ask his question, and I would like to begin with mine. So under Section 2, the Chief Secretary for Administration may grant exemption from requirement under enactment. It says that it's for the sake of preventing, protecting against delaying, or otherwise controlling the incidence or transmission of the specified disease, or treating patients with the specified disease. So the situations listed here. What I would like to understand is that right now, how far are we along when it comes to the implementation of this law? And previously, people have raised this question. As we understand, Section 2, parentheses 1, it does not just include the Shenzhen River region or what is happening there. The Chief Secretary has the power to grant exemption for all situations stipulated under Section 2, parentheses 1. So currently, what could be done but have not been done, which would help with fighting the pandemic, or for example, a lot of our councillors have said that they would like more mainland medical officers to gain access to Hong Kong to participate in the counter-pandemic measures in Hong Kong. Like, we have insufficient manpower right now. Like, even if you're factoring in all the medical officers we may get from mainland and Hong Kong, we are still lagging behind. Like, what's your view on the rapidly increased demand for medical attention in the future? What is your expectation here? I think I would need the I would need a response from the Bureau. So you have asked a similar question from in the previous session, and we have considered the information provided to us by the Chief Secretary, offering some examples. For example, in the Riverbend area, what are we doing there? And license arrangements regarding to offering elderly care services outside elderly care homes. And the Chief Executive herself has mentioned that one of the things we need the mainland's help with is manpower, and we must clearly formally request the mainland to provide some manpower for our quarantine facilities or community health facilities. So that's the purpose, and that's all the information I have right now. My understanding is just like yours, Madam Chairman. So anything pertaining to the prevention and protecting against delaying or otherwise controlling the incidence or transmission of the specified disease, if necessary, the Chief Secretary would work in tandem with various departments. Well, that's your department. I want to ask you, what's your recommendation? How many people will we need from the mainland? Do you have a target for how many beds you need from private hospitals? Like, people who have the capability to help us fight this pandemic, but they are not yet mobilized, would you ask them for help? Like, because if you ask Chief Secretary, they will ask you to consult the FHP, and you are that department, right? You are the FHP. So these people from the mainland, as we understand, the support team from the mainland, they can help us when it comes to quarantine. As we know that they would help us do compulsory universal testing. Of course, that policy is currently delayed for a little bit. I'm talking about this moment. At this moment, what I know, what we desperately need is really medical attention, doctors, nurses. So these people who are capable of offering medical attention, not just for testing. How many people have you asked for? Are you prepared? Are you prepared for are you prepared for the huge number of patients we are expected to see? Do you need help from private hospitals? Don't fudge this issue. Don't just talk about the quarantine issue. The quarantine issue is just a red herring, right? Like, what we need is medical officers. Non-medical officers can help us with quarantine. We need exemptions about medical attention and medicine, right? I want to be clear. What we need is nurse and nurses, because I know two people. I have two of my kin, two people in my family who were infected, same conditions. One person died. The other person had a traditional Chinese medicine. And, these two people had exact opposite fates. Would you permit this medicine and this medical service to be provided to us right now? We need all the help we can get, save whoever we can. Like, how far are you along? How far are you along with regards to this exemption? Over the past 10 days, this is my personal experience. Two people. One perished, the other told me that she's almost recovered. Both are part of my family. So it proves that if you ask them to quarantine themselves at home, you have to take care of them because the average citizen does not know how to do that. What guidance do you offer our citizens? Thank you. I'd like to talk about the manpower issue. As I've previously mentioned, there are these communal quarantine facilities and healthcare facilities. Even if they are not, as we understand, strictly speaking, a hospital, they would still need medical officers. We would still need medical officers to serve there. So it's not just a non-medical person serving in a non-medical capacity. It's not that simple. So I don't have a quantity about the amount of manpower we need right now, but we are talking about this with the mainland actively, and we need to talk to mainland medical teams and mainland government to see what they deem appropriate, right? So the principle is that we need manpower, but we are still hammering out the details because there's a lot of practical concerns involved, and we have to talk about a lot of details. And when it comes to the issue of medicine, we know that different medicine serves different purposes. In the previous meetings, both meetings, there were some, scientific literature has also recorded, we have scientific evidence as well, that some medicine could help with severe cases. Like we know that effective medicine is on its way. So we are very concerned to see whether the quantity of said medicine is sufficient. And as the hospital authority has said, that what will be used on our patients. I'm sorry, I must interject. And then I'll let the next councillor pose that question. I know that last time there was a councillor who have already followed up on a certain type of medicine. That type of medicine, we think that no matter what the medicine, whatever helps people, whatever could save people, you should allow it. So out and about in Hong Kong, I can buy it. I could be honest. The medicine is Lin Fa Gao Long, the lotus capsule pills. So I'm telling you, this will change people's fates. So are you offering approval? Have you approved the medicine from mainland? Are you offering an exemption? Because a lot of NGOs are distributing this medicine in Hong Kong already. So I think it would help alleviate people's concerns, right? As a voluntary worker, you don't want to hear the Department of Health coming out and say all these things. Please understand, a lot of people are using this medicine. I am trying to help the people quarantining at home the best I can. And we know that it is indeed effective. So have you offered an exemption? So last time you work with TVB, you work with the media. A lot of media has reported widely on this issue. Have you changed your mind? If you have changed your mind, I now offer you the opportunity to rectify the record so that when the citizens are using this medicine, you could officially tell them how to use that medicine. Thank you. With regards to the lotus capsule pill that you mentioned, Lin Fa Ting. So, of course, it is a registered medicine in Hong Kong, and we know that in the past 2 weeks, thanks to a lot of help from the mainland manufacturer, there's a large batch arriving at Hong Kong. So that also helps citizens who wants that medicine to acquire that medicine. So, of course, the Hong Kong government has made a request on the central government for help, including help with medicine. So the central government, through various means, have offered us a batch of medicine, and through the Secretary for Commerce, we have received that medicine and distributed to various places, including the hospital authority for the use of at certain communal health quarantine facilities, etc. I understand. Do we have an exemption now? That's what we want to know. Because before you said that the Department of Health said that no go, red light. So do we have an exemption now? That's what we want to tell the public, including the volunteer workers. So all resources provided to the Hong Kong government, including the medicine you mentioned, is subject to the exemption now. Next, we have Carmen Khan Wyman. Thank you, Chairman. So yesterday, in the chief executive's press conference, we see that right now the most important thing is to reduce the death rate, reduce the amount of severe cases, and reduce transmission. So judging from the numbers, we have not met these targets yet, including the all the tests combined together, the rapid tests and the PCR tests. There's almost 50,000 cases, and we have 291 deaths. So we must make use of this law, Secretary, and everyone, all the private organizations or public departments who see what we are doing right now, and we also have a coordination center under the Chief Secretary. I want you to make good use of this law, because the Executive Council, when they passed the Emergency Law 241N yesterday, when the legal counsel, legal advisor has clarified the purpose of this law, according to what I've asked, the Section 2, parentheses 1, it's a very broad purview, right? It does not limit itself to whatever the central government is doing to try to help the Hong Kong government to fight the pandemic. But we can see when we passed, that's what the announcement says, but you pass this law. But on the 10th of March, when the FHB responds to our secretariat, to our councillors, they still say that the 241N is for the sake of providing a legal basis for central government helping the Hong Kong government.
The wording in the provision has not stated clearly that particular purpose. It only said for the sake of implementing the central government's instruction. And when it comes to the medicine, only the medicine provided by the central government will be exempted. So on this public occasion, once again, we need to understand clearly how you can make good use of the emergency regulation. As the chairman said, it is like a gold key. So we are using that too little. Your provision expresses your mindset. You only want to tie in with the anti-pandemic measures of the central government. But no, that's not the case. When EXCO drafted, when DOJ drafted this provision, you are empowered to exempt everything. That's the first thing. So please do not tie yourselves up. In the community, there are supplies. There are different supplies, and in fact, protective clothing, medicine are in shortage. And for private medical organizations, participation, there are a lot of limitations as well. So this law is not only for you to support the implementation of anti-pandemic measures of the central government. It is to show the SARG's commitment. It is not only for supporting the central government's anti-pandemic work. So this is a big problem. The laws should emphasize execution or implementation, not the wording. Today, we are scrutinizing the wording. I allow that. But the important point is execution. On the 8th of March, when you responded to the Secretariat, how are you going to invoke 241N? On page 1, you said CS for A, in accordance with 241N, in accordance with the Bureau's recommendation to consider the factors in 2.2 and give exemption in relation to central government's anti-epidemic work. As I said, it is not the case. It should not be in accordance with the responsible bureau's recommendations. This is not required in the law. Before CS for A exercises discretion, there is this bureaucracy. So the bureau has to make a recommendation first, and then CS for A can then exercise his power. We have already empowered the CS for A to do it top down. CS4A can coordinate like 5 or 13 working groups. He is there to coordinate, so things can be top-down. There's no need for bottom-up arrangement. There is not a need for recommendation from the Bureau. I want some clarification. You have added that point in your letter dated 8th of March, but then this is not required in the law. So are you going to say that the CS4A can only do it with the recommendation from the Bureau? If you won't amend this, well, there is not this requirement in the law. You don't need to wait for recommendation from the Bureau. And in fact, you can make use of all resources available to adopt effective measures to grant exemptions. It needs not be related to central government's anti-epidemic work. Yesterday, the legal advisor said CS4A will do this in writing. Of course, he will not make only an oral decision. But yesterday, our issue is after a written decision by CS4A, how can you allow the public and the central government know that there are these exemptions? Well, first of all, we have to tie in our work with central government. If a certain medicine is exempted or something is exempted, then the public can mobilize all resources to work. Or perhaps you need to build a mobile cabin hospital within 24 hours, then the public will know that they should not make noise complaints because it is an exempted area. It is important to build the mobile cabin hospital. So all the other laws of Hong Kong will see exemption. Chairman, thank you. So in what ways can we be notified so that the public will know? So CS4A has made a written decision. How can we know? Will it be by means of a notice or a press release or what? Okay. Secretary and PAS, please respond. Secretary, any response from you? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Kan, for your comments. I totally agree with Ms. Kan on her understanding of the text. It is related to control of diseases, and everything related to control of diseases can be covered. Apart from this regulation, we want to handle everything related to anti-epidemic work. So all legal requirements will try to convenience things. So on registration of medicine, on importation of medicine, right now, under the law, there can be flexibility so that doctors can get the supplies or medicines faster. Of course, this regulation can play a more thorough role, but then now under the laws, we can actually guard against bottleneck by some administrative or executive means. And I think we are just expressing the commonly used executive procedures. For the other policy bureaus, usually they can make recommendations to CS4A and its office. This is quite common, but this is not the only procedure. Number 3, if there is any news, I believe CS4A will let the public know in whatever channels available. For example, meeting with the press or press release, he will be able to let the public know what is being exempted via this law. Thank you. Ms. Cannon, any follow-up? Secretary, that means you are not recommending to LegCo that you want to add in accordance with Bureau's recommendation, right? This is not a necessary step, correct? So that means the CS4A has wide discretion to give exemptions. So not limited to central government, not limited to recommendation from the Bureau, not limited to medicine from central government, right? And after CS4A makes a written decision, now in the law, there is no mention how he will notify the public or how he would let the public know, not Gazette, not press release or announcement. So what's your explanation? Thank you. This is not a legal requirement. But then regarding communication, whenever there is important work done by the government, there are different channels used to enable the public to know. So things under this regulation can be made known to the public in different ways. Right, let me supplement. This section is emergency regulation. So discretion must be wide enough. Since we're talking about emergency, the central government may be too far away to solve immediate problem. If a group of people fall into the sea, or if there is a hill fire, you want to save people, how much exemption do we need? Sometimes you have to fell the trees in order to reach the peak. Then you have to fell the trees. You won't refer to the law whether that is allowed. You are talking about saving lives. And let's say if you want to dump a log into the sea, that won't be regarded as dumping refuse because you are saving people. The Hong Kong system is very good, but when it comes to emergency or saving lives, your hands are being tied. You are not brave enough to invoke on the provisions. I agree with Ms. Kan, you have the power to save lives, but you dare not do it. Well, every minute, every second, there are new infections. And every second, there are people's lives which can't be saved. Now there are 2,000 odd lives lost. And in the future, perhaps 5,000, according to the experts. Now there are still many people who are not infected yet. They are not up to the hill. They don't know there is a fire there, but then they are walking uphill. So you should exercise your emergency power to stop that. The fewer sacrifices, the better. Many people don't know who will be the next to be infected, right? So you should think from the other way around. This is not a normal situation. We're talking about emergency. So please do not add further knot or rope. Please unlock yourself so that there are fewer people infected. 5,000. This projection of 5,000, I hope it will be invalid, and we should minimize the number as much as we can, right? Okay. It's now 1:11. I can extend this meeting further at most by 15 minutes. I know that this afternoon there is a meeting on emergency law. So it seems that we may not be able to finish our examination. So let me ask you, if we extend to 1:45, no? Okay, 1:30, right? This afternoon, there is another meeting on emergency law. So let's see whether we can add another meeting tomorrow. If it is possible, well, we can discuss with the Secretariat. We may not be able to finish our work, but then I think these are important, especially in case of emergency. If there is objection of extending this meeting to 1:45, so at most 1:30. Mr. Tang Fei. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you. Quite a lot of questions. Undersecretary, yesterday, I'm happy to see that the CE said that Pfizer and MSD COVID treatment drugs will be introduced. I want some clarification. From overseas media reports, these new drugs are mainly for those cases in between mild and severe cases. So they are used to guard against serious cases. So that means these drugs cannot offer therapeutic effect for severe cases, serious cases. Now we want to mainly focus on treating serious cases. So for these new drugs, when can they be used? Now, medical resources are very tight. Many patients. Well, only the severe cases in hospitals can be treated or rescued, not the mild cases. But these two new drugs are for mild cases, not serious cases. Then is there sort of a gap here? Secondly, mainland doctors have started to participate in life-saving work here in Hong Kong. So how wide is these doctors' power of prescribing drugs? Can they prescribe those two new overseas drugs? I know that the mainland authority has already recognized these two drugs and they are being imported to the mainland. So can the mainland doctors prescribe these drugs as well? Besides, when it comes to prescribed drugs, are we talking about Hong Kong or mainland drugs? I think we need to give a clearer account to the public. Finally, about the Chinese medicine, Yanhua Qingwen Jianang, it is registered with the Department of Health, and there were only 7 Chinese medicine included. But in mainland China, 13 Chinese medicines are the ingredients. Is there really this difference? So for the medicine registered and distributed by Hong Kong D of H, is it true that the efficacy is no match of the mainland version? If that's the case, can we have an exemption so that the mainland version with 13 different Chinese medicine as ingredients be serving the purpose?
And finally, these lotus capsules or like the golden flower TC traditional Chinese medicine, in China, it's not a prescribed drug. You could buy it anywhere at any pharmacy. So I want to ask, the current batch of Chinese medicine given to us by the Chinese government, a lot of it went to the public hospital. How could the public hospital distribute this medicine? Do you need a prescription from a doctor in order to obtain that medicine as a patient? Or would that be unnecessary? Thank you. So there's a lot of questions. I'll try to address them all. I'd like to talk about the issue of Chinese medicine first. Of course, with regards to the efficacy of the different versions of that particular lotus capsule medicine, I don't really have that expertise to answer that question. We could consult experienced Chinese medicine practitioners from local universities, and they could provide us with their opinion. And currently, after we accepted the medicine from the Chinese government, we would not distribute this medicine in the hospitals because our hospitals practice Western medicine. But we understand that when the symptoms are mild, we can, through Chinese medicine facilities under the purview of the hospital authority, we could distribute that medicine. And your initial question is about these 2 new oral intake medicine. And scientific research shows that it could reduce the death rate, reduce the rate of severe cases. That might be one of the tools we can use in fighting such a sizable, large-scale pandemic in order to avoid deaths and to avoid all these severe cases of COVID crushing the medical system. I think that's applicable to all over the world. So, of course, the purpose of such drugs is to reduce the amount of severe cases we have, and at the same time, focusing on helping people with severe COVID is also the focal point of the hospital authority, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, alongside with 2 other hospitals. They have been designated as the hospital which will be focusing on treating COVID. And the Chinese medical officers have arrived in Hong Kong, and how will they carry out their work? We are still planning that, and we will make sure that we hammer out the details before we implement all that. So I hope that I have addressed your concerns. So I have to raise a point first. So a lot of our volunteers, they received lotus capsule from other people, and they would distribute them. Does it need a stamp of approval? Because you know that all these groups, they obtain this medicine, they distribute this medicine, they don't know which part of the procedure is the relevant one. Because if you endorse it, people know that this brand is good, right? But turns out the source of that medicine matters, right? You have to obtain that medicine through official route, through the central government, and then it goes down to the community. Isn't that just complicated? Why don't you just believe in the experience that the mainland has, that these medicines work? At least when we distribute said medicines, we would not face such doubts and questions. So this exemption should be very clear. It shouldn't be exclusive to authority hospitals and Chinese medicine facilities, and then you have to line up. And a lot of people saying that they don't want to line up because they're afraid. So you have to understand how the actual operation work in order for people to get the oxygen. Like, would you consider just offering an exemption because people know that this is the medicine from the mainland, and people would that would alleviate their concerns because after all, it's such a large volume of cases. So this Lotus capsule pill is in Hong Kong. There's also a supply. It's a registered medicine in Hong Kong. You can buy it at a local pharmacy. I have to tell you, like, I have personal experience. I spent a lot of money on January. I bought a lot of such medicine. But to date, in some Chinese medical facilities, they would like to send us such medicine because they know it could help a lot of people. Are you telling us that all these people have to offer these medicine to the government or to affiliated organizations? There are various mainland organizations who want to help, but we don't know how to let them help. You understand? Well, now we're delaying things. To be honest, I went to the website. I went to the anti-pandemic website. It's not there. I don't know how to access that website. So not everyone could get the goods. The counselors who are in contact with people who have COVID cannot get the supply. Heard me. So what I'm telling you is true. It's my personal experience. So I hope that you would cut the red tape, right? Cut the red tape, and the volunteers want you to cut the red tape. Next, we have a question from Elizabeth Kwok. Thank you. I'd like to say that these exemptions gives the Chief Secretary a lot of power, and the purpose behind that is to save lives. Prevention, delay and stop the transmission. All these things are very important. So you have to cut the red tape. You have to make things easier for everyone. So I have had the same experience as yours, Madam Chairman. I hope that the government could offer clear guidance. For example, the Chinese medical authorities or the national government, as long as they have listed that they are using this medicine to treat treat COVID-19, be it Chinese medicine or Western medicine, whatever they're using, particularly Chinese medicine. I hope that you could have a list and just offer all medicine on that list an exemption. Because right now you're saying that you would only offer exemptions for the medicine offered by the central government. The Lotus capsule is an example, but there are other varieties as well. Who would know that which batch of medicine is from the central government? Why are you wasting so much time and effort onto dealing with this? A lot of civilian organizations or like kind people that are in China, like you could buy it in Hong Kong, but the supply is not as ample as you imagine. In the previous meeting, I've said the paracetamol and pain relief medicine is already out of stock. A lot of our citizens cannot access your hotline. They don't have medical attention from doctors. They're really reliant on us offering them Lotus capsule pills to solve it, right, to cure them. It's really true. So you're saying that the Hong Kong supply of medicine does not have an exemption, but the supply of medicine from the central government does. So what do we do then? So the medicine right now in our warehouses, we don't know if it's from the central government or not. Should we just let the people die, right? Should we just not send medicine despite there are a lot of people who need it, right? Isn't that just a waste? And we are unable to help these citizens in need. So please make a list out all the medicine that our motherland has clearly stipulated that all this medicine works on COVID and they're used to treat COVID, and particularly Chinese medicine, and offer all of them exemption, and we could be just use all that medicine without worrying. So right now, we are giving these people medicine which have simplified Chinese written on it. We don't know if it's legal or not, but in order to save lives, we have to do it, right? We are doing what the government should be doing. But you are telling us that there's all this legal gray area. We don't know if we're breaking the law or not. That's a very irresponsible attitude, and that's very unreasonable. I think all councillors are facing a similar situation. Be clear cut. If there is such a law, then clearly write out what kind of medicine will be exempted so that everybody could adopt relevant, could take action. So if the Chinese medical authorities have already approved such medicine, then like, what do we have to wait for? Why is the Hong Kong government standing in the way? Like, it's just for cancer drugs, right? It's the same thing. Like, the Chinese government have already made a medicine, and why must it be subject to all this extra red tape in Hong Kong? Why would you trust the FDA but not our country, right? This is a very serious problem. You are stopping people from getting medicine and getting medical attention. This is an urgent situation. We have to save lives. You should clearly tell us that there will be an exemption. You can use that medicine. You shouldn't just ask the citizens to buy the medicine themselves. Like, how could they do that? They are tested positive. They cannot go out. So let us consult the councillors. If there are nobody opposes officially, the subcommittee should recommend that for all medicine which the Chinese government has already officially declared that it could be used to treat COVID, we will officially recommend the Bureau to adopt that list in the name of the committee, right? This is just a saving grace, right? We shouldn't care what brand the saving grace is from. We try to save lives here. So we have only enough time to accommodate questions from one more councillor. And we would arrange for another session of this meeting because this meeting will end at 1:30. So, Councillor Kong, what are you trying to ask about? Councillor, so I would like to generally, just like at the very beginning, I have opinions with regards to this law. Thank you. So, in response to what you've just said, this is called an emergency law, right? We have to use it to serve an emergency. So we really need a lot of manpower in quarantine facilities. I want to raise a few cases, real genuine cases. Yesterday night, there was an elderly person being quarantined at the Asia World Expo. He did not have a shower, bath for 22 days. He was stuck on a bed for 22 days, 22 days. He could have left the hospital a few days ago, but no one could do the follow-up work necessary with elderly home. So a lot of old people who are right now waiting at the A&E rooms, they don't have access to toilet, they do not have water to drink because no one could take care of them. And a lot of families tell me that their elderly in their families have died in the quarantine facilities because no one could contact them. There was an urgent case referred to me last night. I made a lot of calls. I tried very hard, but it's very difficult to access any help. In the end, the nurse who did help me, she was very polite, but in the end, the government has also helped me. I finally was able to help the elderly lady who did not shower for 22 days to officially be discharged from the hospitals finally. So I hope the government will take this issue seriously. If we want to save these people, we must use this emergency law to adopt emergency measures and seek help from the central government. I hope that we could make sure that our elderly can retain their dignity and we can reduce the death rates. Thank you, Councillor. Before you answer, I hope the councillors could think about this. What advice, what opinions or recommendations do you have? You know, if we can't finish the process today on this issue, whatever advice you have on how to operate, how to do things. Of course, one of our recommendations is to increase the number of medical staff available. So thank you, Chairman. We understand the case you have brought up. A lot of people have sought help, and we know that the amount of manpower available for medical staff or healthcare staff there's a huge shortage there. A lot of people have contracted the disease, and a lot of people who work in various industries have also contracted the disease, and that has hurt the supply of manpower. So seeking help from the central government to ask for more manpower. We are doing that right now. And as we have previously mentioned, we are trying to ask the mainland government and ask the central government for help in increasing the number of manpower we made available in Hong Kong. We are doing that right now. Thank you, Chairman. So, Councillor Chan Ho Yen, would you like to ask a question? I'll let you say a few words. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I know that time is short. I'd like to respond to what you, Madam Chairman, has raised and what Elizabeth Court has raised about the Chinese medicine. So, medicine from the Chinese government is exempt. But I think the proper recommendation would be, if there's fake medicine out there in the market, we should take action. I'm talking about fake medicine. If it's just a difference between the Chinese version and the Hong Kong version, I think the government should state clearly that we don't know what type of medicine is subject to does have exemption and what does not. Turns out, if we want to save a life and we bring medicine to those in need, we don't know if that medicine is the right version of that medicine with an exemption. And on the 24th of February, you have issued this announcement. You said that the first batch of lotus capsule pills and the golden flower capsule pills, and also another variety of traditional Chinese medicine, these three types of medicine is recommended by the Chinese government. It is part of the recommended treatment. And you have said yourself that this medicine is recommended. Of course, ideally, patients should consult their own Chinese doctor. Since there's an acute need right now, I hope that you will offer clear guidance. I hope that you could take action against fake medicine, not Chinese medicine.
It's already 1:30. Secretary, please take note of this point. Next time, I hope to get some good news from you so that volunteers and kind-hearted people won't have that worry. We are all here to save lives. We will adjourn our meeting here. We will have another meeting as soon as possible, once we can sort out our schedule. Thank you very much. Today, we had a very constructive and in-depth discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you, administration. I declare the meeting adjourned.